Hi everyone, it's Gary Nicholson here for the Mountain Weather Information Service. This is your Planning Outlook video updated on Tuesday the 31st of January, and we'll take a look through towards the upcoming weekend. And the change of month into February is bringing a change of weather pattern. We're starting to look towards the Atlantic for incoming areas of low pressure, which will bring frequent periods of gales, storm force winds at times over the mountains over these next few days ahead. Tricky with the day-to-day details, but expect frequent precipitation of rain, often snow on the Scottish Munros, with those higher areas often staying near or below freezing. Now we're focusing in on the details for the end of the week and the weekend on this video, but we'll just set the scene over the next day or so. Here's the chart for Wednesday. We've got fronts gradually clearing away into the North Sea, but I think a legacy of dampness and low cloud across the eastern and southern Pennines in particular from that system. Some drizzle also across eastern Scotland, but for many places a dry day. We do see an area of low pressure, another front though, moving into the southwest. That will bring some rain into the Welsh hills as the day goes on. And towards the end of the afternoon, this rain also turning up across the southwestern Scottish Highlands, running in further into the southwest Highlands into the evening time with some snow above, say, around 700 metres or so. And ahead of that rain, winds were strengthening to gale force, and widespread upland gales will continue through into Thursday as south or southeasterlies, typically strongest across western mountains, somewhere between 40 and 60 miles per hour across the higher summits, and areas to the north of some of the major ridges will see some of those strongest winds. We've got milder air moving in though, and an area of rain will be fairly persistent across these western regions. Pulses of rain running northeastwards through the course of the day. I think rain right up to the highest levels, so a bit of melting will be going on of that lying snow over the highest Scottish tops. But as these charts will show, that milder air through Thursday is quite short-lived. This is the temperatures at 850 millibars, and that's around 4,500 to 5,000 feet in the atmosphere. So corresponding to the heights of those highest mountains in Scotland. We've just run through into later Thursday and Friday. The temperatures that were around 4 or 5 degrees at that height begin to drop away as we go through into Friday, and we're back down to freezing or just below. There's midday on Friday, and the temperature at that level is around -1 or -2, so it's back to talking about most higher terrain being frozen and precipitation falling as snow again by that time. If we just run that story through the weekend, you'll see how Scotland particularly stays in the colder air at that level. The temperature's only around -1, -2, so if you correspond that down to the mountains of northern England, you'd be looking at temperatures just above freezing at that level, 300 metres or so lower than this elevation. But it's that story of staying near or below freezing across the Scottish Munros throughout the weekend on into the early part of next week that just will mean that the snow that falls will have a chance to accumulate over those Scottish mountain tops. I think even into next week that story may well continue, although we just get a push of slightly milder air. That's around Tuesday. So just bringing something less cold to the mountains at that stage. The message is that most higher Scottish mountains remaining close to or below freezing, but there'll be cycles of freeze and thaw on the lower slopes, and particularly across the hills of England and Wales. Now if we just return to the synoptic charts going through into Friday and the weekend, we'll just set the scene a little bit further. Detail is very tricky, so we'll treat these charts with caution in terms of local details. But for Friday, the story is we've got an area of low pressure, possibly across a deep system, tracking somewhere across central and southern Britain. May well interact with Wales, and if it does, it could well give severe gale force winds across the Welsh mountains. Towards the north, strong winds, but maybe just easing down through the day as south-southwesterlies. Areas of snow showers moving in to the western and southwestern Highlands. Drier and brighter towards the north and the east. And some places may get a lull in the wind across northern England and the south of Scotland, but just keep an eye on those details. Again, treat details with much caution for this chart for Saturday. Once you get very small areas of low pressure as shown here from the model at 3 to 5 days out, you're really struggling to get the absolute details from it. Those lows could be slightly different in position and will make a big change to who will get the strongest winds and the greatest amount of precipitation. It looks as though we see one area of low pressure at least moving northwards across the British Isles. It'll give some rain, some snow on the higher mountains, and the risk of gales or severe gales at least for a part of Saturday. Some areas may get away okay, but I wouldn't be trying to guess at this stage which areas will do best at this stage. Likewise into Sunday, another area of low pressure and fronts looks like steaming in off the Atlantic, so it's that changeable, quick-moving scenario that looks the most likely story, but again, who gets the worst of that at any one time is hard to say. Expect winds to strengthen to gale force at some point in the day, and expect precipitation to become frequent or persistent in some areas. So not a great looking weekend, but don't write it off altogether. Some places may get away with it for at least half a day, so watch your local details. And just taking a step back and looking at the big picture into next week for the Atlantic and Europe, we see further areas of low pressure moving in from the west, giving continued periods of gales and the risk of frequent precipitation on many of the western and southwestern facing mountains in particular, with south or southwesterly winds dominating. And that may well set the scene for a few days next week. The interesting thing to watch for is how that area of high pressure that's centred towards the east will behave later in the week. We may eventually start to see the high that's centred out here start to battle back in and hold up the lows to some extent in the Atlantic. And eventually we may well see something colder and drier try and come back in as February goes on. A lot of uncertainty with that one, but it's just something to watch further ahead into the new month. So some uncertainty going further ahead, and just keep a close eye on the details for this weekend as well. All the information can be found in the written files updated every day here at the Mountain Weather Information Service, and we'll update this video again on Friday of this week. Thanks for watching, and bye for now.